back to the channel. Well, Porsche can't very well go producing a car like this without us having something to say about it, right? So let's get this all off our chests. And in fact, let me just tell you what I think about this car and see if you agree. There's probably bound to be quite a lot of comments about this, but I can't say I'm really a fan, if I'm really honest. We've talked before on this channel about GT3s versus turbos and things like that. I'm never that impressed with the GT range of Porsches, and I'll explain why. I've driven a number of them. I've driven a GT3 on the track, and I've also driven the GT3RS. You'll remember that video where Tony kindly lent me his, and we went out in his, which I must say I really did enjoy, but I only drove it for less than an hour, and that would probably be why I really enjoyed it. But more of that later. Let's talk about the new GT3RS then, and give you kind of an opposing view to all the I suppose fanboyism that everybody has been really getting into of late. Let's start with the looks. Look at it. I mean, they've thrown everything at it, haven't they? That wing, you can't avoid that wing. It dominates the entire car. Porsche don't call it a wing though, they call it a drag reduction system. Indeed. Now, you've got to admire the engineering of it. It does adjust according to what you're doing with the car, and I suppose it will really help you get around the track. But look at the size of it. It's enormous. It dominates it. Otherwise, there are fins and little air directional systems all over the car, which that's either your bag or it isn't. I'm really in two minds as to whether an average driver could take one of these things and really drive it extremely fast, such that you need those kind of devices all over it. But I respect the engineering, and we'll get to that in a little while as well. Second point, it's heavier than the 991.2 GT3RS. The new 992 GT3RS is 3,268 pounds. The old one is 3,153 pounds. That is a 115 pounds difference. Now, Porsche talk about in their blurb online thrilling lightness. It's heavier than the old one, just saying. There's very little more power, a few more horsepower. This is therefore going to be, from a bhp per tonne perspective, maybe around the same as the old one. There's no great advantage here to having the new one from that perspective, even though Porsche does claim that that wing, going back to the wing, helps an additional 88 pounds of downforce. So we're making progress. I don't think it looks great. It's heavier than the old one. There we are. The cost. Now, notionally, this car cost $223,800. $223,800 without any extras. Now, I've seen using markups.org dealers charging $180,000 over for a GT3 Touring. So dealers are going to kill any notion that this car is anything less than a $400,000 car. Potentially as much as $500,000. Who knows? But you know, you're not getting good value for money straight off the bat. It's heavier. You've got the wing. It's more money. Just saying. Now, for those of you who are thinking, oh, I could just get in and drive this every day, that depends on your appetite. I've driven, as I say, GT3s. I've driven a GT3RS. Once you get in them, you have those hard bucket seats, which if you're a bit wider than I am, become a real pain in the backside. And in fact, if you were driving them a long distance, they're a bit of a pain in the backside, honestly. They are about that thin, or thick. Not very thick at all. There's not a lot of padding on them. And yeah, once you get in them, you think this is great because you've got these things on the side of the seat and they're hugging you in here. You think, I'm a racing driver. Well, you're not. You're just going to get uncomfortable. Just saying again. Now, it is engineered extremely well, right? Everything on the car does something. So there's no fake fence. There's no holes in the car that are not supposed to do things. If it's on the car, it is used for something useful. So direct air. So those in the front bonnet, in the hood, those holes are taking air out of the radiator, hot air, and directing it through those fins on the top of the car down back through the underneath the wing. And even the engineer of this car has been very careful to show that where there is something there that looks fake, he even has put on there no vent. So he wants you to know that everything on there does something. It's engineered extremely well. However, I'm betting that if you put a decent race car on a track and put it against this, the race car would win, because it doesn't have air conditioning, it doesn't have all the creature comforts, that it probably wouldn't have ABS, it wouldn't have all those things on it that would make this a slow car. By no means is this a slow car, but in terms of being a full-blown race car, I don't think it is one. It's too heavy for a start off, even though there's plenty of power. So, that being said, what's it like on the road? Well, they drive okay on the road, but if you're going to use one as a daily driver, you probably want a turbo, in all honesty, something that's a little bit softer. So, not a good racing car, not the best road car. What is it? Well, I've got some further thoughts on that. We'll come to that in a minute. So what does this leave you to really conclude? Well, look, it's a marvellous piece of engineering, right? And I think there has to be a halo car of some kind in the GT range. And I'm wondering whether the GT3RS is going to be a thing for the 992. Perhaps they'll bring that out in the 992.2, which will be, I guess, end of next year, beginning of 24, when we start seeing those. But it leads me to believe it's really about being a halo car and about image, rather than necessarily about being something which is particularly brilliant in anything that it does. I suppose you could call this one of the ultimate track day cars. So if you are one of those people who is wealthy and wants a car solely for using at the track, not really racing but on a track day, this is probably the car for you. And, you know, it's fair for me to make these comments because I know that I'm not really the customer for this car. It's not my bag. It might, however, be your bag. You might be that wealthy person who wants to just amaze people on the track. And I think this would be probably the exact niche that this car is designed for. But Porsche are almost making overtures that this car would probably be trailered to the track rather than driven. Now, I know at least one person who drives his car to the track and uses it in earnest, his GT3RS, and I'm sure there are others, and I think that's what this is really for. It's a fast track day car. So there you have it. There's my armchair review of the new Porsche 992 GT3RS, a car that to me doesn't look particularly cool. Maybe it will look cool when it gets 30 years old and old school stuff suddenly starts to look cooler than the new stuff. But to compare it with the original 911 RS of the early 70s is ludicrous. It is nowhere near as lightweight. It is about twice the size of it. It's got about 3 times the power, or whatever. Give me the RS all day and any day for pure driving capability. For this car, not so much. This is not on my list, my personal list of cars that I really want to own. But let me know in the comments below what you think. Am I wrong? Where am I wrong? What's your view? Would you take one really over a Turbo S? Or even a Turbo? Or even a 911 Carrera S? That you've got to work so much harder to have more fun with at much slower speeds. That to me seems like the better car to buy. But I'm not in the market for a $500,000 or $400,000 car that I'm going to use just at a track day. Maybe you are. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, subscribe down below. Give me a like. Flood the comments with your own thoughts. Would love that. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.